time I introduced Professor Udoy Saikia was 5 years ago, and we were actually at our former place of lectures out at Walkerville at St Andrews. And it was a fascinating evening. I really enjoyed it, and it's still very clear in my memory, the lecture that night. It was a fascinating account of the process of nation building that's underway in Timor Leste. Now, Udoy, if you didn't know, is also a member of our society. He's also a member of our Research, Publications and Awards Committee, a valued member of that committee. Professionally, he's a social demographer and a professor at Flinders University with a long interest in population dynamics, human wellbeing and sustainable development. Could you please give a warm RGSSA welcome?
Thank you so much, Lee, for this nice introduction. And at the outset, I would like to thank RGSSA for giving this beautiful opportunity to come and talk to you again after 5 years. Thankful to everyone, Lee, and I know Guy, and my mentor, Professor Ian Hay is somewhere here, my guide, and that's a kind of a source of my inspiration, getting involved in RGSSA. I can't do tap dance, but I originally come from a place called Assam in northeast India. I arrived in South Australia 27 years back as a PhD student. Probably you have heard about Assam. It is in northeast India. We are famous for tea, Assam tea. I think we produce around 65 to 70% of India's tea, and it's a beautiful state. But moving to Adelaide, of course, the academic environment was my main source, then also the cricket. The Bradman's place, and that was another source of inspiration why I decided to come. Then, and of course, that is the time when I arrived. I'm talking about end of 1998. I didn't know about Timor Leste. I didn't know that East Timor, but it was very much in the news that time, especially ABC. News. So I started kind of learning about which countries. That time it was not a country, but I knew the struggle. I was kind of interested in knowing that place because of the media coverage here, and that is a time. As in my introduction, just told that I'm a demographer by profession. But I work in population and development issues. So it is, although I'm a demographer, but it's a more multidisciplinary kind of approach I take from population. So when I started knowing about Timor, then I realized it got independence in 2002. And I think I did mention when I came here 5 years back for my presentation that I was reading after the independence, I think around 2005 or 6, I was reading a newspaper article in Advertiser here, and it showed that this country, this the newest country that time in the world, that time, had the highest birth rate in the world. And they were producing something like 8 children, 7.8 in demography, we call 7.8, around 8 children per woman. And the news also said that since independence, since 2002, the number of births, in fact, went up. So since it got independence, the birth rate went up, so society started producing more babies. So that is the curiosity I landed up, and as a demographer, I just wanted to know how come a small country, new country, had the highest birth rate in the world. So I got a small amount of money from my department. I think that time probably Ian was our head of the department, and to go there and see whether I can investigate a little bit about it. And that is the first time I arrived there. So it has been around 20 years since I first time landed in East Timor to find out what was happening. And I think in my last presentation I did talk about what happened during that time, why the fertility. In demography we call it fertility, total fertility rate, which is birth rate. Why it went up so much. So I'm not going to repeat that one again today. I have some publications on that as well. But that is the opportunity I utilized to get to know the nation building process, because it got independence in 2002. When I arrived there, it was still in internal conflict. Still it was not much stability there. It was a bit challenging that time. Internet connection was not that great. But I managed to kind of get in touch with some of the very leading people there. One was that time Prime Minister, I think he was Prime Minister, President Janana Guzmao, his wife, Kirsty Sword, she's from Australia. So she gave me a small, she used to run an NGO as well in Timor on women and child health. So she gave me a small table and a chair for a month to find out what's happening in the demographic aspect in Timor. So that was the starting point, and for last two decades since then I have been working in Timor. I say Timor is my also second home, and I developed a kind of a relationship with policymakers, to the grassroots people, many community organizations there, and most importantly, some of the most talented people from Timor. And I'm very happy to tell you that a couple of them are today here when they heard that I'm giving this presentation. So we have a Timorese student community here. So some of them are attending today. And one is my PhD student from Timor Leste. I will introduce her a bit later on during the discussion time. So, since I presented 5 years back, what happened in last 5 years, although I will try to give you some idea, but I may not restrict my presentation just to tell you what happened in the last 5 years. I might go a little bit beyond that. It's a bit difficult to get all the data in last 5 years what happened, but hopefully I'll be able to give you some idea on that. Timor Leste, of course, I'm sure you all know it, where geographically it is located. And there's a joke in Timor, they say if you go to the top of the mountain in the capital or near somewhere in Timor, you can see Darwin, very easily. So I think to some extent it is true also, because it's quite near from Darwin, so we normally fly. So to give you an idea of when Timor was born, that is a time period 2001 to 2003. I mean, it got independence in 2002. So some of the data I'm presenting here is not exactly specific to a particular year, but it is a kind of around about that time. And I'm comparing with Australia, because strategically Timor is our neighbor country. And just to see the contrast of what's happening to our neighbor. So the per capita income, if you go back 2 decades back, when Timor was born, Australia we had around, in US dollar, per capita income was around $20,302. And that time Timor was around 470. Infant mortality was extremely high in Timor when the country was born. 82 babies born per 1,000 newborn babies used to die. So it was extremely high at that time, very high infant mortality rate. Compared to that time, Australia, it was 5 per 1,000. Maternal mortality was incredibly high. It was one of the highest in the world. 850 women, mothers used to die because of the birth-related issues per 1,000 live births, which was that time 11 only in Australia. Now, my interest that time was the fertility rate. Total fertility rate is the birth rate, 7.7. That means on an average, around when the country was born, it started with a very high fertility, around 7.7. Life expectancy at birth also there is different. I mean, that time Australia was only 1.7. That means Australian mothers, women, per woman, we had less than 2 children, which is 1.7. Total population, Australia, of course, that time was 20 million, and Timor had 790,000 only, which is less than a million. Now, recently, again, I kind of gathered some data to compare it where Australia is and where Timor is in 2021 and 23. Yes, Australia's per capita income has gone up. Timor is also has gone up to 1,500. Australia's infant mortality rate has dropped to 3.2 from 5. Timor is also dropped from 82 per 1,000 to 42 per 1,000, which is a good achievement. Maternal mortality, there's a drastic decline. It's an achievement for Timor since it's got independence. From 850, it came down to now 195. Still, it is high, of course, definitely high. But from 850, it has come down to 195. The dramatic change is happening in the birth rate. It came down from 7.7 to 3.6. So that is, this is the 3.6 is the latest government report. It shows that birth rate in Timor is 3.6. That means on an average, women in Timor is producing around between 3 to 4 children. So drop from around 8 children to 3 to 4, it's almost half. So it happened within around 20 years. And that kind of rapid decline in the birth, it's amazing in the sense it's not usual, because if you look at the history of birth rate falling in many countries, it is not that drastic, it is gradual. But Timor achieved its one. In fact, it took me by surprise. Some few years back, I think in 5 years back when I came to give the presentation here, I was not expecting that to go down that so quickly. As a demographer, we projected it. I think my projection was that it will be around 4 by 2050, but it already is 3.6 now. So there's something is happening there, which is, I'm a bit curious, and I will have to find out, which is probably a good one with. Life expectancy has gone up, and now Timor has almost doubled the population from 790,000 to 1.3 million. And that is because of the high birth rate to start with. Now it is declining. So if I kind of sum up this data, I kind of tried to see the change in percentage. It's probably easy to understand. So the per capita income in both Australia and Timor has gone up. In case of Australia, the change is almost 171% jump from what we had in 2000 and what we have now. In Timor also it is around 69%. Then infant mortality rate. Of course, Australia already had a very low infant mortality rate. So change is obvious, that is not that big, 36%. And for Timor, there's a 95% drop in last 20 years in infant mortality. Again, since it got independence, I consider it is a big achievement. I'll tell you why a bit later on. Maternal mortality rate, it came down huge. I said it's the biggest success is in maternal mortality rate. mothers dying because of the babies. 336% drop in 20 years. That's amazing. I think Timorese should be proud of it. Something very positive happening again. We are talking about a situation when the country was born, it was nowhere. And since then, how it has achieved that one, it is really, really good. Life expectancy, in case of Australia and Timor, the rate of improvement, which is in percentage, in both Australia and Timor is almost equal. So 7% increase in life expectancy, and total population also for Timor and Australia is very similar. Of course, in case of Australia, the increase in total population is mainly because of migration. I think all you know, as a demographer, I keep telling people that you can imagine a situation in Australia that, just imagine a situation that zero net migration, then Australia is shrinking. If you take the migration as a zero factor, then you take the other equation, we are shrinking in reality. So the increase in Australia's population is basically, I think it is around near 70% of the increase in Australia's population is explained by migration factor. Whereas in case of Timor, it is the natural increase, birth minus death. And in case of Timor, in fact, the migration is the other way. Timor is losing people. I think the latest statistic, I didn't put it here, the latest statistic shows that Timor, I think in the last year, it lost 600 people who came out of Timor. So the net migration is negative. That means they are losing population because of migration. Again, I'll highlight on that. Sorry. And this is where, total fertility rate, the 53% reduction in birth rate, and in Australia's case also 14% reduction. Just to draw your attention about the birth rate, I would like to, as a demographer, I would like to tell that there is not a single country in the world where birth rate is increasing in the longer term. Everywhere the birth rate is declining, including Sub-Saharan Africa, most of the poorest region in the world. You would be surprised to know that Calcutta in India is highly populated, of course, had a high birth rate before, but the city of Calcutta, the total birth rate, the TFR, is less than Australia. In Calcutta, the birth rate for women are producing 1.5 children per woman. In Australian case, still we have around 1.7. So this is a change happening in many countries, many poor countries as well, quite rapidly. I think Timor is becoming a member of that group of a rapid change in the birth rate. But I was not expecting that to happen in Timor so quickly, and it looks like it is happening very, very quickly. So some of the other statistics to show you the good things happening, the population coverage, total population that enjoy better health and well-being, it has gone up to quite a lot, but of course the total population is also increasing, universal health coverage is also increasing, and health emergency protection is also increasing. So overall in the health sector, Timor is doing quite well. Why I am saying that it is doing quite well, I hope this is, because you won't believe, when the country was born in 2002, there was not a single doctor in the entire country. Zero. Because most of the doctors were either from Indonesia or from Portugal, I think. Once it got independence, the skilled people left with a big vacuum. There's nobody. I don't know what was the number of nurses, but some people anecdotically, they said that even the nurses were almost zero. There's no health center, there's no hospital there. So the country was born in 2002, almost like kind of at zero health facilities. And from that point, how it has improved is quite amazing in 20 years. I think I did mention in my last presentation, probably I did, when Timor tried to train doctors, local young people to become doctors. Of course, they didn't have the training facilities, they didn't have the knowledge. They wanted to send around 1,000 young Timorese to Australia to train them in medical profession. But unfortunately, we rejected it because we said we cannot train them to the Australian standard of medical, and we know the medical is very strict in allowing who can be trained here, but that was very unfortunate. We did not design something, okay, we cannot maintain at a high level, but design something. So they had to go to Cuba. So Cuba invited 1,000 Timorese to train them as medical professionals, and I think almost all of them came back within 3-4 years, and that helped a lot. And I think Cuba designed that medical training for Timor very similar to the Chinese bare-feet doctors concept in a very rural focus, and that really helped them to come back and start that health process. And I think there was a positive result for that, and hope we could have done something at that point, but we missed that opportunity to help a country. So it is improving, as you can see now, numbers per 10,000 people, the doctors is 7, number of nurses and midwives per 10,000 people is 17. So from 0 to have that figure, I think is, in spite of being a poor country, oil-dependent country, it is a good achievement. Now, what I am going to focus today is, I gave you a little bit of background of the socio-economic development, but my focus, because I am a researcher, we are working on the young people. I was involved in a human development report for UN for Timor Leste, which we produced in 2018. And we are working mostly on focusing on the young people because of the high birth rate. They have a young population. In fact, Timor is the second youngest in Asia, age-wise. Afghanistan is the number 1. As far as the young population is concerned, the proportion is so high. Timor is second in Asia, according to the latest data. Average age is 21.7. That shows how young the population is. Anybody has any idea in Australia what is the average age? Yeah, somebody said 40. It is 40. I think it's 39 point something. It's around 40. So Timorese are half younger. It's 21 and we have a 40 So still it's a very, very young country. And population below age 30 is 65%, such young people. So that's why our focus is how we address this young population in Timor and what's happening with them. So the question is that, yes, we had a young people, but now the birth rate is dropping quite dramatically. That means in the future, we'll not, because we don't have that many babies now. So these babies, when they grow up, as the birth rate is declining, so the proportion of young people will be less and less and less, because the birth rate is declining. And and I tried to investigate why, how come they're achieving this rapid decline in fertility. And that is where my PhD student, Iriana, she also gave me some information because it took me by surprise how come it is happening. So I'm quoting one of these. It is from WHO. It's a report from World Health Organization. There's a quote here. One visible change that I have seen is that women are seeking contraception more openly, and they are now often taking their own decisions in this area. A midwife of 28 years who works at the National Hospital in Delhi. Delhi is the capital. Previously, we had to speak to the husbands or other family members about family planning services. But now women seek the information on their own. Many of them ask about contraception when they are about to be discharged after childbirth. So there's a drastic change happening in the society about the reproductive decision-making process. Again, I'd love to share one of my experience when I arrived. I might have mentioned it in my previous presentation 5 years back. That time, birth rate was very high, and I started my investigation. I went to a couple of villages, and we had some focus group discussion with women, and my co-investigator, who was a local Timorese lady, she was helping me to conduct that focus group discussion. We tried to find out that time, I'm talking about almost 20 years back, why they were producing so many babies. What was that? So they were giving different answers. Mostly they were talking about that's a husband's decision, basically, how many children we have. So they kind of express that they don't have much power in the reproductive decision making. Of course, Timor is a kind of a patriarchal society to some extent, but I was standing next to one gentleman. He was a husband of one of the women there, and he had a baby. He was carrying a baby. There's another 2 kids next to him. So I became a friend. I had a friendly chat. So I asked him, because when we are doing the survey in the households, whenever we ask them how many children would you like to have, this is a very typical demographic survey. How many you have and how many you would like to have. Almost that time in every household, the number 7 was very common. Everybody said, how many you would like to have? 7, 7. 7, sometimes 8 or 6, and 7 was very common. We're thinking, what's happening? Why everybody in the family wants to have 7 children? So I asked the gentleman who was a husband that how many kids you have. He said 3. I said, how many you'd like to have? He said 7 again. So I asked him, 7, why not 10? I just he got very angry with me. He looked at me. He said, what are you talking about? I do not have a job. I'm very poor. I'm unemployed. And how can I have 10? So in spite of not having a job and being poverty is an issue, somehow 7 was okay for him, but going beyond 7. So it was not about the rationality of economic decision up to 7. That was amazing, because normally when you relate it to your income, we think about 1 or 2 children. But 7 was, that is a bit of a different story. Why 7? There was some cultural component into it, and they were coming out. I think also there were some evidences showed that time they wanted to repopulate the country because they thought that time they lost people during the conflict. And they were thinking that if the country's population declined, already we lost it, so the identity crisis will be there. And he showed me to the hill when I was having, he showed me to the hill. He said, look at the hill. It used to be so full before. Now see, it is empty. So there was some kind of a feeling, and it was mainly among the men, I believe. But that somehow translated to the women to have more babies. There's a small element of that, but from that, it has a cultural change now. These were the quotes. I don't think so I would have seen these quotes probably 15, 20 years back. So it also shows the women empowerment, how women are, and the next generation of Timorese. where, and that time the contraception was not available. There's no hospital, no doctors. The only thing it was available was an injection, which is a temporary kind of a contraception. It goes for probably 4 or 5 months. Then again, so a lot of things have changed, and it's probably I need to get involved more on to see how it is happening. Now, that decline, this is called a structure of any population. This is Timor population. So the base is where the babies are, okay, 0 to 5. And if you go up, it is the elderly population, 85 plus. So as you go up, the age goes up. So if any country, if you structure the population in this kind of, for developing country, this is very typical, the first one. It's like a pyramid where the base is quite high, that means young population, and as you go up, it narrows down. Now, because of the birth rate is declining quite rapidly, so in 2050, the age structure that we projected, it would look like this, the same country. So you can see now it will be more economically productive population is considered between 15 to 65. In some countries it is 15 to 60. They are in demography or in any research we call them economically productive age group. Economically means they earn. So 15 to 65 is considered to be economically productive. Here the economically productive in the first scenario, 2023, still smaller compared to children, Then in 2050, because of the birth rate is declining, it will become like that. And it is almost inevitable. It happens in almost every society. Australia is already like this. It is even like this, if you see Australia's age pyramid. So in 2050, can you hear? Yeah. 2050, Timor's age structure will be like this. Now, this brings a lot of development issues. So that's what I'm going to talk about it today. I do not want to go too theoretical here. I'll try to explain you a little bit here. I'll try to kind of avoid, but what happens in any country when birth rate drops, it drops everywhere. And when the age structure changes, and when the proportion of children and elderly people become less and less compared to the economically active population, then we call it a window of opportunities opening. Window of opportunity means that the economically active population now that they have less dependent, so their savings, theoretically their savings go to other activities, like into their education, skill development, and many other things. Government can take their tax, as a tax, and they can invest on these people, economically active people, because they are saving now, and they can invest and they can. So that is where we call demographic window of opportunity, because you have now savings, you can uplift the economically active population. Then that window of opportunity opens in every country. When about Australia, I think we are in the last phase of this window of opportunity. It is only open for 40 years normally. And it's based on the experience. It lasts for 40 years, that window. Now we can turn that window of opportunity to dividend. It is called demographic dividend. Dividend in the sense, dividend does not come automatically. What happens is that because we have in the savings in the economy, less dependent, government can spend more money on the skills for the economically active population from the start, from the beginning, from the kids. More training, more school, more skills, and it becomes a dividend. So window of opportunity becomes a dividend if the policies are right. If you do not invest, it is a waste. South Korea is the best example in the world how they utilize. In 1980, if you go back to the history, South Korea's birth rate was very similar to Indonesia and Timor's birth rate, almost very high. Then South Korea suddenly dropped like Timorese. But South Korea was very clever. Somebody gave them very good planning. They started investing a lot on the young people. And they were the most successful country utilizing window of opportunity to turn into a dividend. And you can see Kia Motors, Samsung, and all these things as an outcome of this. But they have some other problems as well. But this is what to say that window of opportunity is a natural process in any society, but the demographic dividend is not. It depends on the policies. Otherwise, it can be a disaster. If you don't invest in the skill, they are unemployed, unskilled. And that is a crucial stage for Timor now, because fertility is dropping, what government is doing. And that will kind of determine where the nation is. So the report I was involved in, so we gave, this is a report in 2018 we produced for the policies for Timor government. I was working very closely with the Timorese government and United Nations. We projected in that report what can be done for Timor to achieve the development. There's something called Development Index. UN produces the Human Development Index. The index is between 0 to 1. It's a mathematical calculation based on the investment on the human resources, education, health, then income, and all this combined. It's called Human Development Index. Now, if it is 1, that is the best scenario for a country. If it is 0, that is of course the worst scenario. Now, Timorese, when we started writing the report, the index was 0.54. Then we saw different scenarios to the government. And we cannot go in detail. Everything is there in detail. We have all the calculations for Timorese government, how much you need to invest, how much you need to invest in health, education, and also in economy. If they do everything all right, by 2030, we projected that their index will go up to 0.71, towards 1. 0.71 is where Australia, I think, is around 0.76 now in that index list. So it will move towards a more highly developed country. But that is where the window of opportunity has opened in Timor now. If the government is clever enough to start investing on the young Timorese, then we'll achieve that in 2030. But if we neglect it, then we saw the different scenario. And if we go as it is, the progress will be very less. The last graph there. So now, from this, then, okay, so the young people is the focus. Birth rate is dropping. Window has opened for Timor already. So the proportion of dependent people, I think there's limited opportunities in the country. It's still nation building process, still economically lagging, quite behind, although it is progressing. Now we have young people, still it is young. Now how do we invest it, where the opportunities will come? Government is taking a lot of initiatives to help them, but still far behind. So one of the opportunity, what the Timorese young people are doing is what we are involved in now as a research. A lot of Timorese migrating to Australia and also to Korea in search of job. There is a program called Australian Seasonal Workers Program. Probably you have heard about it. That's a structured Australian government program where they bring people from the Pacific Island mostly Pacific Island, to work in agriculture and other sectors, especially in the rural areas of Australia and sometimes even near the cities. So that program, and there is another one from Korea, very similar program. They take people from Timor to work there. And because of the lack of opportunities within the country, and for these people, they started grabbing these opportunities, And this is called unskilled labor migration. They are not called as a skilled migration. Australia we call unskilled migration. Unskilled means may not be highly educated in a particular profession, but they are good enough to work in the agricultural field or maybe in restaurants and hospitality and other sectors. So that opportunity has become very, very, very popular. Thousands of Timorese have started coming, especially in last 7 to 8 years, a big flow of Timorese coming to Australia as well as going to Korea. Now our current research, that's what I'm going to give a little bit of presentation on. We started to measure what is the impact of these Timorese, especially the young people coming to Australia, and how much they're contributing to back to their families. What is the impact both here and back in their families in Timor? And that is where we got some funding from Australian Research Council in collaboration with DFAT and UN to measure the impact of this migration policy on the well-being of the individuals and the families of Timorese. So this is where I'm going to show you some results from them. And this is a statistics from the government. The remittances, the income, they get from Australian program as well as from Korean program, it's increasing. It's quite considerable, amount of money they get as remittances from these programs, from the workers. And it is increasing. The blue graph is from Australia. The Korean one is the one, brown one. South Korea, yes. So Australian government says it's a kind of a triple win. Australia, we are short in labor supply in agricultural sector. It is contributing a lot for our development in agricultural sector. That is a win for Australia. And also origin countries, it's a win for Timorese government. I'm saying that Timorese government is not against this migration because it's a kind of an understanding between both government. They will send laborers. It's one way for government. It is to solving the unemployment issues. Unemployment is still a little bit high. So they are not against that one. So the win for Australia, win for Timor, and also win for the individuals who come. So it's a triple win. But it looks okay, but there are a lot of hardships the laborers go through. So the real story is sometimes a bit different of this. Monetary wise, it's a gain. So we tried to investigate the impact on well-being. So some of these findings I'm going to present it. So this project was funded by Australian Research Council. As I said before, the Flinders University, we conducted this research. Government of Timor Leste, UN, and DFAT, Department of Foreign Affairs and Trade, Government of Australia. So we started it 2 years back, and it's almost coming to an end. So we developed an index called Wellbeing Index. Again, a little bit theoretical. So we said the human development, especially country like Timor, culture is so important for human development. For example, forest is so important. The environment. It is not just a monetary concept. So we tried to bring the development concept in a more multidisciplinary or multidimensional way. So we call Wellbeing Index a multidimensional index. It is a bit similar to Human Development Index, but Human Development Index only considers health, per capita income, and education. But in our index of well-being index, we cover almost 8 or 9 different dimensions in life. Like also the relationship in the community is a very vital factor for well-being in Timor. So there are many other factors we consider. Yeah, I will avoid that this one. This is a bit of a theoretical one, that how we inspired the original concept of Amartya Sen, and also the concept from the country called Bhutan, where they developed the happiness index. Bhutanese king is always against the monetary concept of the well-being index is a multidimensional index, so we tried to measure the well-being impact of the Timorese labor migrants and their families from a multidimensional perspective. So this is a kind of survey design. I'll jump, it's a little bit boring. But these are the four different ones we measured: economic, health, knowledge and skills, and policy related. Because we are measuring the well-being of these migrants, and we decided to, after doing a lot of reviews and all, we decided to keep these four dimensions as main one affecting the well-being of the laborers who come here to work in Australia, and also when they go back. So we surveyed around 594 returned migrants. So what we did was we surveyed people who have already returned to Timor. Around 594, that also included not only Australia, but also Korean one who came back from Korea. We did Korea because Australian government was interested to do a comparative analysis of what works for Korea or may not be working for Korea, and what is working for Australia or may not be working, some kind of a comparative policy. So they requested us to do for Korea as well. So then that is when they return, the first set, 594. Also we did a survey among those who are working currently in Australia. That's a small sample. Around 149 migrant workers in Tasmania, Northern Territory, and few in other places as well. So they are currently working in Australia. So there are two groups here. One group already returned to Timor. We went there, we surveyed them, and one group who is currently working in Australia. This methodology, I will avoid it. Now, this is when we measured, it's called two-third rule. That means if there are different indicators, what it says, the literature says, suppose you have to define your life, suppose you have 9 different indicators, to tell that you have satisfied the well-being, out of 9, you have to fulfill 6 at least. Then the level is called that you have satisfied the well-being in life. That is a minimum standard. And that is called two-third rule. Little bit of mathematics behind, so I will not go, but that was mainly developed a group in Oxford. So I went there for some kind of training with them. So when we came back, we developed this idea. It works quite well. So now, the results were a bit, the green one is when they are currently in Australia, and the red one is the ones who have returned to Timor. So if I combine all these 4 dimensions, we call it overall well-being. So we found that when they are currently working in Australia, they somehow maintain around 87% maintain their overall well-being. But those who have returned to Timor, it drops to 37.5. So there's a drastic decline when they are in Australia and when they go back. That is overall, dropped by almost 57%. The knowledge well-being, the skills they develop, they are very happy of the skills they develop when in Australia. Everybody was very positive about that one. Almost 99% achieved that well-being. But when they are back, eventually their skills level, their knowledge level drops as they are more in Timor, and we found only around 63% when they return, they could maintain that knowledge and skills level, so the well-being in that case. Similarly, knowledge, policy related, this is a little bit different, the support from the government and other policies to maintain their well-being, basically the support system. So in 98, it also includes the employer support, the government support, many other things. So in Australia, 98% was kind of maintaining it, but again it drops to 72%. But the biggest drop is in economic well-being, the monetary part of it. So when in Australia, they have 76%, they say they could maintain well-being. It came from the mathematical formula, but it dropped quite dramatically. The returnees Timorese in Timor, only 25% could maintain the economic well-being. And the other big drop is the health. 83% of the Timorese workers here, they could maintain, it includes both physical and psychological health. But it dropped dramatically to 46%. So these are the well-being dimensions. What basically it shows is that somehow they were maintaining the well-being when they were working, but as they came back to Timor, almost every dimension it dropped. Especially the drop was quite dramatic in economic well-being and in health well-being. Then we tried to see some more insight. So now currently in Australia, there are a few other questions we asked to investigate a bit more. So I'm giving you some of the graphs. Do you think strengthen employment opportunities, do you think that strengthen employment opportunity being in Australia? And they were quite positive. They said, yes, the future employment opportunity after working in Australia, 91% they said, yes, it did. But when they went back to Timor, that dropped again to 72%. And between Australia and Korea, if I compare among the return, or Australia and Korea, it's a very similar thing, 72%. Now, those who went back to Timor, why economic well-being dropped so much? If you can see that, though people who were working full-time here, in Korea also, they came. So from the Korean system, those who came back, only 32% is currently employed in Timor, those who return. And from Australian seasonal workers, only 20% were currently employed. So the economic loss, in the sense they were not employed in that, so it drops quite a lot. So the other one is when they are in Australia, almost near 100%, it's 96.5%, were working in agricultural sector, those Timorese migrants who came to Australia. So mostly the Australian, whereas for Korean system, fishery was the main one in the first graph. The brown one is Korea. So they were more involved in the fishery. Around 41.5% were involved. But the second graph, which shows that when they came back, the percentage involved, those already the employment opportunity is very less, but out of those who are employed now currently, out of those, the agricultural sector only absorbs 20% of those employed. But whereas in Australia, when they are working, almost 96%. So the whole scenario changes. It shows the lack of opportunities when they go back, in different sectors. So it gets a bit mixed up here. Now, gender differentials, in both cases, those who are in Australia, those who return to Timor, women are a little bit behind in overall well-being. So there is a gender question as well. Even after return, in fact, that gap widens even more after returning for women. Uh, so do you think strengthen? I have presented it. So intention to return. So this is another thing. You know, when I went to Timor after my first project, and I want to get involved in more burning issues, and when I was talking to the government people, they talk about this program, and they say what's happening in Timor is that, okay, they go to Australia, they work there, come back, and again after a few months they go back. So there is a cycle. So they say want to retain them. They come back with some skills and knowledge and money. We want to retain them, but we're failing to retain them in Timor. They said, can you find out what's happening? What would be the policy, perfect policy to retain them so that they become productive, contribute to our economy? Otherwise, the cycle will continue. And you can see here, Australian seasonal workers, who returned, we asked them, would you like to go back, return to Australia? 83% of them, they said yes, they would like to come back almost immediately. And they were, of course, headhunted by employers in the agricultural sector because they are skilled, they want them to come back, they call them. But not the same case for Korea, though. Those who return from Korea, only 20% want to go back to Korea. Whereas for Australia, almost 83% want to come back. So there's a big difference there. And those who work in Korea, out of that, 13% plus 23. So almost around 35% wants to, those who worked in Korea, 35% now wants to come to Australia. So there is some kind of attractiveness as far as the labor market is concerned. They want to come to Australia. So some of the questions we asked about, on a scale of 1, how satisfied are you with overall overseas workplace conditions? 91% said yes. So they were quite positive in some sense. But I was kind of trying to do some analysis last night again, just to present it today. Then I realized one thing, that there is a relationship between how much time you spend in Australia and also overall well-being. And I found if they spend somehow small amount of time in Australia, when they go back, 57% could maintain high well-being. So there is a relationship how long they were here. I'll have to investigate a bit more. It may be something to do with the psychological health. Away from the family may have a big impact on their psychological health. So there is a clear relationship I can see. Higher the amount of time they spent in Australia, lower is the maintaining the well-being. Of course, something happening in more than 3 years, it goes up again. Those who spend more than 3 years, around 26%. But there is something coming up here we need to investigate a bit more. So I think I'm in the last couple of slides. So some of the quotes, we did the survey, we interviewed them, and you can get an idea. In Timor, we have no money. We go there, work and make a bit of money and come back to buy a motorbike, build your own house. So I'm happy. In other people's country, you make money quickly, then you work hard also. We return with only just enough to build a house, because just 6 months money, around 6,000 to 7,000, which is US dollars, maybe not even enough to build a house. On returning, we set up a business in strong competition with Chinese who have huge amounts of capital. So when they come back, they want to invest it, but they cannot compete. They want to invest their money savings to start a business, but because there are other capitalists there, so they cannot compete with them, and they mentioned about it. So that is some of the work we did in Australia. But it was a very good experience knowing them, investigating what's happening. There are a lot of other things in this research. I can't present it everything. And we tried to involve the policymakers at Flinders University. We invited the government people to present our findings. And you can see in the middle the Honorable Ambassador of Timor Leste. She is such a good policy maker, and it has been a pleasure working with her from the beginning. She has been there with us from designing the survey, from everything. She wants to investigate what's happening. And when we presented the main findings, she did come along with other government officers, and we presented it. And I came to know from Iriana, my student here, that they are also forming some policies based on that. So yeah, so there's a team. What we did also when we did our survey, we trained the local researchers how to conduct a survey, how to do the analysis. It is not just that we went and did the analysis and came back. So they are also quite aware of the well-being index, how it works. And it was good working with the local researchers there, and that's how we do, we operate. Yes, and our investigation is still on. Hopefully, we'll come out with some concrete policy to work with the government. Now, very briefly, I will introduce, in this project, I was fortunate enough to bring one of the most talented researchers from Timor with a PhD scholarship. Iriana is here, if you can raise your hand. And Iriana, I worked with Iriana almost since 2010, and I came to know her, and I always kind of identified her as one of the potential who can work with us. And when we offered this position, she left her very high-level government position, working almost with the Prime Minister, and she came and she joined us. But her focus is now on reintegration. How you develop a very good reintegration policy to retain these Timorese more productively in Timor and make benefits out of these both schemes. And she's working on that and almost near submission. And Iriana plans to go back to Timor very soon, middle of the year, and she will be in the policy making and very much focusing on reintegration. And people started contacting her from the government, when you are coming back, we need you. So it will be very soon. So with that note, I will stop here, and I welcome, I'm sorry I've taken some more time. I welcome you for any questions for discussion, and I will, Iriana might join as well. Thank you.